Hi, welcome to Delve's Intro to Grounded Theory webinar. I'm LaiYee, the co-founder of Delve, the online software for coding qualitative data. At Delve, in addition to creating software, we also create online resources like the Essential Guide to Coding Qualitative Data and the Practical Guide to Grounded Theory Research. We also create free online courses like the Qualitative Data Analysis course. I'm excited to show you the ins and outs of how to do grounded theory. The goal for you is to learn a practical approach to grounded theory. So I'll be giving you a set of actionable tools that you can use when you're analyzing and approaching your own research, with a specific focus on using the Delve qualitative analysis tool. You don't need any background knowledge on grounded theory, but it is helpful to have a general idea of what qualitative research and qualitative coding is. This webinar is also great if you are already an expert but you want to brush up on your skills. I want to point out that I'll be showing a perspective on grounded theory, but it's not the only approach. It can be intimidating to learn grounded theory, which is why we will be focusing on a few specific things. We're going to focus on when you should use grounded theory, how to collect and analyze data, and then how to use the tools of grounded theory to analyze data and derive new concepts. What we're not going to cover are the history and nuances of every version of grounded theory. There are a lot of different versions, but because our goal is to take a practical approach, I will be simplifying some of the terminology and language from the original grounded theory papers. But if you do want to learn more after this webinar, I do highly encourage you to read the original books and papers from Glaser, Strauss, Corbin, and Charmaz. So today, we're planning to cover a few things. We're going to be talking about what grounded theory is, when you should use grounded theory, the benefits and limitations. We'll go through a high-level overview of how the process looks and then do a sample project demo and end with a Q&A. All right, so first, what is grounded theory? Grounded theory is a qualitative research method that enables you to derive new theories based on the collection and analysis of real-world data. It's different from other research approaches where you come up with a hypothesis and then try to prove or disprove it. For example, a non-grounded theory approach to research is one where you start with a hypothesis, for example, like all children want to learn, and then you collect data and see whether or not the theory holds true. That would not be grounded theory. Instead, with grounded theory, you want to first collect and analyze data and then derive theory from that data itself. So with this approach, you might go out and collect data, maybe interview children and parents, and then from that data, derive a theory. Another thing that grounded theory is not is that it is not a process where you do one round of data collection, one round of analysis, and then derive your theory in distinct steps. Instead, it is a cyclical process where data collection and analysis happen iteratively, and from that, you derive your theory. So, overall, with grounded theory, theories are derived from real world data, and data collection and analysis occur iteratively. So, when should you consider using grounded theory? You want to think about using it when there is no existing theory that explains a phenomena that you want to study. Or maybe there is an existing theory, but that data is incomplete. So, there are benefits and limitations to grounded theory. So, one benefit is that the findings oftentimes reflect real world settings. Usually, you use methods like in depth interviews and observation instead of other research approaches in less natural settings like research labs or focus group tables. So, your findings will more accurately represent the real world. Findings are also tightly connected to the data. Because grounded theory primarily relies on collecting data to determine the final outcome, those findings are super connected to that data. It's also really great for discoveries. It's a very strong inductive method for discovering new theories. You don't go in with any preconceived hypothesis about the outcome. So instead, you allow the data that you collect to guide your analysis and theory creation, which leads to more novel discoveries. There are limitations, though. One, it can be really difficult to recruit. Since you have to continuously recruit based on analysis results, the recruiting criteria is not predefined. So it can be challenging to continuously find the right participants for your study. It's also very time consuming to collect data. There's no way to know ahead of time how much data you'll need, so you need to be flexible with your time. There are also challenges in analysis. Since the analysis occurs on a rolling basis and involves making a lot of constant comparisons between different excerpts of data, it can be super challenging to keep track of your comparisons and findings as you go. For that reason, it could be incredibly helpful to use a qualitative analysis software like Delve to show you how to stay organized in your analysis. So let's walk through a high level overview of the grounded theory process. And I'm going to show you this quickly so that you see what it all looks like before we dive more closely into each step. So, I want to explain that there are two fundamental concepts to understand in grounded theory. One, data collection and analysis are cyclical. You continuously collect and analyze data in a cycle. The second concept is that you start with raw data, such as transcripts, and then you take that data and turn it into your theory. In the end, you have a theory that's grounded in your data. Every time you do a round of data collection and analysis, the data takes a step closer towards becoming a theory. The data collection process in grounded theory is called theoretical sampling. So you start off with your first round of data collection, recruit a small group of people, but you plan to recruit more later. You interview these people, get those interviews transcribed, and then begin analysis. That first step of analysis is open coding, when you break your transcript up into individual excerpts. From those excerpts, you then do open coding, and you continuously group those excerpts into codes. Once you do that, you then might go back into the field and collect more data. So you can see how new data compares to your code so far. Your new data might contradict it or give you more details on the codes. And then you continuously do more rounds of data collection, and your codes and groupings will change as you go. Eventually, you'll take those codes and group them together in a step called axial coding. You can think of it like finding the axes or connections that connect those codes together. And after grouping codes into categories, you then go and collect more data. So you continue refining those codes and categories even more. You start to rearrange them. And then once you have a set of categories, you'll then define one core category that ties all those categories together. And this is a step called selective coding. This is where you take a core category that connects all those codes together. And this core category becomes the basis for your final theory. Grounded theory is a process where data collection and analysis happen in a cycle. And with every cycle, your raw data takes one step closer towards becoming your grounded theory. All right, so let's go into a sample project. So before I dive into this, I do want to make sure that you understand that this project is a sample project, meaning the transcripts are fictional and the analysis and coding I'm doing is not an actual analysis in a real study. But the purpose of this is just to show you what this process is like so you can apply it into your real world study. So let's dive in. Grounded theory, you first collect data in a process called theoretical sampling. And this is going to be your first of many rounds of recruiting. You recruit a small group of people based on your initial research questions. Those questions will change over time, and you will be recruiting more later. So don't worry about recruiting the perfect group. Let's say that in our example project, our research question is, how did high schoolers in New York State adapt to learning during the pandemic? I'll make a decision and I'll start by interviewing a few high school seniors. I will then prepare that data by getting those audio files transcribed. I'll then bring those transcripts into my tool. So I'm going to switch tabs and show you Delve, and I'll show you how this all works. So this is Delve, which is the online qualitative analysis tool. And when I'm ready to get started, I click on Get Started, and then I can drag and drop my transcripts in there. So I'm going to take my transcripts, and there they are. I can navigate between them here on the left-hand side. The next step is to do data analysis by doing open coding. So Open coding is a process of breaking up your transcripts into individual snippets. And I'll show you how to do that using the Delve Qualitative Analysis tool. I'll start by creating a code called uncategorized. So I type that in and press enter. And this is a placeholder code for my snippets before I assign labels to them. So I'm going to go through each one of my transcripts, highlight different sections of text, and click on uncategorized. You can either do this line by line, meaning you're going to code every single line in your entire transcript, or do it more selectively and select things that stand out to you. There's no right or wrong way to do that. I'm just pointing out two different approaches. I typically do this selectively, but pretty much what I'm doing right now is clicking on different sections of text. I can even highlight multiple paragraphs at a time, or maybe a single phrase within a sentence, and then add it to uncategorized. Once I do that, I can click on see details and see all those quotes for uncategorized, all listed in one place. So this process of open coding is just breaking up your transcript into individual snippets, assigning them to code uncategorized so that I can code it further later. So there we go. Those are all of the snippets in my project. Now we'll do the next step in analysis, which is to do constant comparisons. Constant comparative method is a process of doing constant comparisons between different groups of data and slowly grouping them into a structure to formulate your theory. In open coding, we compare snippets with snippets and create codes that connect them together. And I'll show you how that works. So let me jump back into my project. And we're going to click on snippets on the left-hand menu. And this is where you'll see all the snippets you've created so far. Now what I'm going to do is compare snippets to one another and see if there's a way I can connect them with codes. So over here, I have a snippet from Chi Ming who says, "It was stressful. There was a lot of anxiety in figuring out how to keep up with my grades." I'm going to then compare that to other snippets I see within the project. So over here, Ben says, "It was really upsetting and I had a lot of anxiety about missing my last chance at the championships." And another quote here where he says, "I was really anxious and stressed because I was going for that scholarship." So I'm seeing a theme here between anxiety and stress. So I'm going to click on that and create a code called anxiety. And then I'm going to code other snippets with anxiety as well. And now if I look at anxiety, I have all those quotes gathered under that particular code. So let's do a few more. Anjana says, "It was tough feeling more isolated. I was feeling more lonely." And then Ben also says, "It felt lonely not being able to see my teammates every day." So I see loneliness as a connection between these. So I'm going to code both of these as loneliness. And then let's see. "My tennis team practices were suspended and eventually canceled." Versus another quote here that says, "My friend's surprise birthday party got canceled." So cancellations, disruptions. I'm creating a new code called disruptions. But as you can see, I'm starting to just code different quotes. Chi Ming, "I felt more connected during this time since we could eat lunch or have snacks together. I felt a little closer to my family since my parents started to work from home." So you're starting to see this process here where I'm reading different snippets, comparing them to one another, seeing if there's anything that connects different snippets together, and creating a code that pulls them together into a group. Now let's talk about capturing memos. Analytical memos in grounded theory are a way that you can reflect on your thoughts and contradictions by writing memos during the analysis. As you're coding, you might notice different types of contradictions. So one thing that came up in my example is that I noticed one person saying that they felt closer to their family, they felt more connected, whereas others felt more lonely during the pandemic. So that's something that is a contradiction or something that I want to delve a little bit deeper into. So what I can do is I can code this section under loneliness, but because it was about being more connected, I can open up this code and rename it loneliness and connectivity. And write a description that says some students felt more lonely while others felt more connected during the pandemic. So, memos are really great when different quotes don't fit super clearly into a single code. You want to use these memos to reflect on these contradictions. And memos are notes that are going to help you formulate your analysis as you go. So I included different types of snippets that pull at different parts of this concept, put it into a single code, but use my memo to describe and elaborate on it. So use memos to explain contradictions or other thoughts that you have about what you're finding. All right, so now that I've got a set of codes, each one has some supporting quotes, can we form a theory yet? Is this enough for us to create our grounded theory based on the data we collected? I can say that some high school students experience loneliness while others experience connectivity, but I don't know if this holds true for more high school seniors in that area. And I don't know why some experience loneliness while others experience connectivity. I actually have more questions than answers, and I don't feel enough confidence that I have enough information for my theory. So I'm going to need to collect more data to elaborate more on these codes and concepts I found so far. I want to see if my ideas hold true if I interview other high school students. But before we collect more data, I want to describe a little more about what we're aiming for. How much data do you actually need before you have enough to formulate a solid theory? Well, you want to aim for theoretical saturation. So, theoretical saturation, what is that? It is the point at which additional data does not teach you any more about your topic. I'm going to continue to interview more people, and each interview should teach me more about these codes, such as loneliness and connectivity. But once I've connected enough interviews, I will reach a point where I don't learn any more. Each interview will start to simply confirm what I already know, and at that point, I know that I've saturated all I know about the topic. I have reached theoretical saturation, and I do not need to collect any more data. So, in our example, we obviously have not hit theoretical saturation yet. That means we need to do another round of recruiting via theoretical sampling. So, we're back to data collection. We're in round 2 now, so let's recruit more participants. So, whereas the first round of theoretical sampling was determined by my initial research questions and I interviewed high schoolers, this round's going to be informed by what I've learned so far in my data analysis. So, let's reflect on that contradiction we found, where some students experience more loneliness while others experience more connectiveness. Why is this the case? So, this can lead me in a number of directions. If I ask the group of you here who I should recruit next, you might have a variety of ideas. Maybe talk to more high school seniors, maybe talk to high schoolers from different parts of the state, maybe interview parents. But essentially, you want to use the data and analysis you have so far to guide you in this decision. So I'll make a decision here, and it's not necessarily right or wrong decision, but I'm going to decide to recruit parents next to see if I can find a clue as to why different students experience shutdowns differently. And specifically, I'm going to interview the parents of the students I've already spoken to. So I recruit parents. I go out to the field, I interview them, and I get those audio files, I get those transcribed, and I'm going to switch and bring them into my Delve project. So now that this is a different type of recruit, I want to show you how to use the participant information tab in Delve to differentiate between this first and second round group of interviews. I'm going to click on participant information, and this is where I can add descriptors to describe some details about each transcript. I'm going to add one called role, and I'm going to add students and parents. So for everyone I have in here so far, I'm going to assign them as students. So I click on this transcript name, assign it as students, and there we go. The 3 that I have so far have the role of students. Now I'm going to click on transcripts, and I'm going to bring in the transcripts from parents. Click into each one, go to participant information, and then assign them as parents. So you can see that with each round of recruiting through theoretical sampling, you do that by deciding who to recruit based off what you learned in your analysis. Then you take your transcripts and bring them into your software. Your software should be able to handle multiple rounds of interviews, and you continuously build those transcripts into your project. So now, after theoretical sampling, we're going back to open coding, but we're not starting from scratch. I will be doing constant comparisons again, but this time I'll be comparing the snippets in these new transcripts to codes that already exist. So I'm going to start by creating new snippets and assigning them to uncategorized. So I'm doing this in the same way I did before, where I highlight different sections of a parent's transcript and assign it to uncategorized. So that's just that process of open coding again, where I'm breaking up transcripts into individual excerpts. And again, you can highlight different paragraphs of text if you want. You can highlight just a single sentence. You can highlight an entire paragraph. But either way, I'm categorizing them into a code called uncategorized. All right. So I'm doing constant comparisons now. So now I'm going to go back to my project. I'm going to click on snippets here on the left-hand side. And now I'm going to filter by the role parent. So now I'm looking at just the quotes of parents in this project. And I'm going to also filter by uncategorized. So I'm just focusing on parents now. And now I'm going to read these and then compare each one of these quotes to the quotes I have. So let's see. Anuj said, "My job in healthcare really impacted our home life. Work was busy, very busy, and so stressful." So I'm going to, this seems like it could be related to anxiety. So I'm going to click on see details. I'm going to compare it to the anxiety quotes here. Looks like it's related to that. So I code it as anxiety. Since my office shut down, I started to work from home for the first time. I got to spend a lot more time with my kids. So this seemed to be related to connectivity. After being laid off from the library, I started to take remote gigs from home. It meant I was home all day with the family. It was really the most time we spent together since Ben was a little baby. So I'm going to code that one as connectivity. But I'm also noticing between these two quotes right here that both of these are also very much related to the types of jobs that those parents have. So I'm going to code this as parents' jobs. Code this one as parents' jobs. So as you can see, I'm doing comparisons between these quotes and what I'm seeing in the code so far. And then for each one of these, I also might write a memo. So for parents' jobs, I might write, there may be a connection between parents' jobs and loneliness and connectivity. Right now, that's a little bit of a guess. It's kind of a thought that I have, and we'll see if it solidifies as I continue to do analysis. All right, so after I've done some rounds of coding and I've got a list of codes, the next step is then axial coding. So this is where I start doing comparisons between not just snippets, but between codes. So I'm doing constant comparisons, but this time I'm finding connections between codes. You're comparing codes with codes and creating categories or axes that connect them. This process of axial coding will raise some more questions and highlight where you have theoretical gaps, areas that you need to learn more about. So for the sake of time, I'm going to jump ahead and assume we've done lots of rounds of theoretical sampling and open coding, potentially even with other groups besides those students and parents. And we're going to assume that we now have a big list of codes. So let's jump back into the project. So we got a big list of codes here now on the right-hand side. And whereas before we were comparing snippets with snippets and created codes to connect them, we're now going to compare codes with codes and create categories to connect those codes. And codes can be connected by their similarities or differences or by connections, such as causation. So I'm going to look at connections by comparing my notes on each code. If I click on codes on the left-hand side, this is my code book of all the codes that I have and all the descriptions I wrote underneath them. So I'm going to read different codes and just basically compare them. Very similar to how I did the coding before, where I'm comparing snippet with snippet. I'm just comparing codes with codes now. So I'm trying to see if there's a connection between impact of parent jobs, loneliness, and connectivity. So I'm going to open up loneliness and connectivity. I can read my description, read my quotes, look at impact of parents' jobs. I'm comparing quotes there. If I do see a connection, let's see if I can connect them with a category. So I'm going to go back to my transcript page, and then I'm going to make a new code called impact of parent jobs on loneliness connectivity. So that is my category code, and I'm going to take impact of parent jobs and bring it underneath that. And there we go. That is a category that is connecting my two codes together. I might also think it's related to this, parents working from home versus parents away from work. I'm also going to group that under there. But this is how you create a category to connect codes. I might see, and then for the rest of them, I'll do the same thing where I make those comparisons. And for example, if I find something that's all connected to how people's friendships and social lives were impacted, I'll make one called friendships and social lives. That is a category right there. And then I'll bring this down here a little bit. And then I'm going to connect different things to it. So social life and events canceled, no sports, socially isolated, changing and canceling plans. So this is basically that process of creating categories and connecting codes together. And then by the end, you want to work on getting all those codes under some sort of category. Right, so after doing some axial coding, you once again go back to theoretical sampling. Because axial coding is going to bring up different gaps, you might realize, oh, these seem to be connected by a category, but maybe there's still more for me to learn. You go back into the field, you recruit more, and then you bring those transcripts in and you do this process again. So in the interest of time, I'm going to skip showing that, but it's going to look very similar to how I brought in those transcripts from parents. But let's assume that we skip forward in time and we're getting closer to theoretical saturation now. Once you're closer to theoretical saturation, you want to start taking the next step, which is selective coding. And selective coding is when you connect all your categories together with one core category. Selective coding is when you find those connections between different categories. And specifically, you'll be comparing categories with categories and creating one core category to connect them all. This becomes the central idea of your grounded theory. As a note, not all fields of thought within grounded theory agree that there should be a selective coding process, because they don't think you should force a single core category if one doesn't arise naturally. But for the purpose of our example, I will demonstrate how to find a core category. So I'm going to look at all my codes and categories using the code book again in my left-hand menu. So let's pop back into my project. And I'm going to go back to the code section here. And right here, these are already my categories. So if I expand them, these are my codes. In gray, these are my categories. So these are all my codes and categories. Now I'm going to compare categories together. Connection to family and friends, emotional reaction to disruptions, friendships and social life. So I'm going to create one selective code to group these all together. When I do that, I will be expanding upon them, rereading the different quotes within them. I'll be looking at my memos again. And then once I figure out what that core category is, I will go ahead and create the core category. So I'm going to make that core category loneliness versus connectivity impacted by parents' careers and friendships disrupted. So that is my core category. And now I'm going to take the other categories and drag it underneath that. So now I have a core category connecting different categories together, and each category connects different codes together. Now we're finally ready to write our theory. So now we've done rounds and rounds of data collection and data analysis. Let me just briefly summarize everything we've done so far. We did a process of open coding where we broke transcripts up into snippets. We then compared snippets with snippets and created codes to connect them. We compared codes with codes and created categories to connect them in a process of axial coding. Then we did selective coding, where we compared categories with categories and created a core category connect all of those. And finally, this is all leading up to our theory. As you can see, we have one core category now to represent the central idea of our grounded theory. So I'm going to go back to my project, go to my codebook. This is my core category, and that core category was derived directly from the data that we collected. That's how you create a grounded theory, ground it in your data. So the next step is to turn your codes into prose and narrative for your final research report. So I'm going to look through my codebook and then turn these codes and analytical memos and notes into my final narrative. So you can export this codebook as a Word document. And I'll show you what that looks like. Export codes as document, and then start building your paper around it. I'm pulling it into Google Docs here so you can see it in this webinar. And this is the document with my core category, my codes, and quotes underneath. And you can either start from this or copy and paste different parts of it into another document to start writing your theory. And then you can use quotes to back them up. So either start from this or open a separate document on another window and then start to pull those quotes in there, start to turn all of your codes into narrative, and then tell the story of your data. All right, so that is how you create a grounded theory. Thank you so much for listening to our introduction to grounded theory. In the end, you now have a theory that is grounded and derived from the data that you collected. This was Delve's Introduction to Grounded Theory webinar. At Delve, our goal is to help you express your research findings and hone your analytical research skills through articles and resources and webinars like this. We also have a free online course. When you're ready to plan your qualitative study, code your data, or write your research report, then check out Delve, which is online coding solution so that you can take your research findings from observation to reality. That's the end. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar, and check us out at delvetool.com.